Before the world knew me as the giant who fell beneath a stone, I was flesh and blood, a soul bound in chains of destiny. They call it the story of David and Goliath. But what if I tell you the truth no one ever dared to whisper? What if the so-called monster was not born a villain, but a man forced into a battle he never chose? For centuries the world has repeated the same tale. The boy with a sling, the fall of the Philistine warrior, the legend of triumph. Yet hidden behind that victory is a silence darker than the valley itself. Who was Goliath before the stone? What scars carved the giant long before the battlefield? Why has history erased his human side, leaving only the shadow of arrogance? In this video, you will discover the untold Goliath story, the side of the Bible giant that reveals pain, loneliness, and truth buried under centuries of fear. We will explore the rise of a Philistine warrior, the crushing weight of pride, the stone that shattered more than a skull, and the legacy that shaped faith itself. This is not just about Goliath's fall. It is about every moment when human pride collides with destiny, when strength turns into a cage, when history crowns heroes but buries the broken. As you listen, ask yourself, do we judge too quickly? Do we forget the human beneath the myth? If this story awakens something in your heart, let me know your thoughts below. Comment the question that burns within you, share your voice, and join this journey of truth. And if the voice of the forgotten giant touches your spirit, I invite you to like this video and subscribe, so together we can keep uncovering the hidden side of the stories the world thought it already knew. Childhood. Born under a heavy shadow. From the very first breath I drew, the earth trembled beneath my weight, and the eyes of my people marked me as different. They called me giant, but the word carried no joy. It was not a gift, it was a chain. Where other children played in the dust of Philistine streets, I walked alone, towering, awkward, strange. Mothers pulled their sons away, whispers followed me like shadows. This one will fight. This one was born for blood. I longed for the warmth of a simple embrace, but instead I was offered only the cold iron of expectation. Do you see the wound here? Not of the flesh, but of the soul. To be feared even in your own cradle is to carry exile in your bones. While Israelite children learned the prayers of their fathers, I was taught only to lift stones heavier than my frame, to carry shields larger than my body. My lullabies were the clash of swords. My bedtime stories were warnings. Never show weakness, never bend, never break. And yet, within me beat the heart of a child who wanted nothing more than to be seen, not as a beast of war, but as a boy who could laugh, who could stumble, who could rest. But giants are not permitted such luxuries. Consider this truth. When a soul is raised without love, strength becomes a curse. The people thought they were shaping a protector, but they were binding a prisoner. Many of you listening may feel the weight of similar chains. Perhaps your family, your work, your world has named you only by what you can produce, never by who you are. This is the hidden tragedy of Goliath's childhood. It is not a story of privilege, but of isolation. And the lesson is clear. When greatness is demanded without compassion, the heart begins to crack long before the body falls. Forged in iron. The making of a weapon. I was not raised. I was forged. The Philistines placed me in the fire of training, hammered me with discipline, sharpened me with commands. I became less of a son and more of a sword. Every sunrise was a drill, every nightfall another test. There were no moments of rest, no days of innocence. My youth was melted into armor. They called me champion, yet I felt only like a tool in the hands of those who feared their enemies more than they loved their own. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowd where every cheer is not for you, but for what you represent. You are not a person, you are a symbol. You are no longer allowed to fail, to stumble, to doubt. In our world today, we still forge people into weapons. Athletes who carry the weight of nations, leaders who are treated as if they must never falter, children burdened with the dreams of their parents. The cost is always the same. Identity is lost in the fire. They did not raise me to live. They raised me to win. This truth cut deeper than any spear. Every scar on my body was less painful than the silence in my heart. I learned to swing the sword, to crush with the spear, to terrify with my voice. And with every victory, I was less free. Because once you are made into a weapon, you are owned. And those who own you will never let you put the blade down. The mistake I made, and perhaps the mistake many of us make, is to confuse strength with self. I believed I was only worthy as long as I was undefeated. And so, I chained myself to my victories. If I won, I was praised. If I faltered, I was nothing. The truth is haunting. When your identity is built on applause, silence becomes unbearable. And my silence grew louder with every triumph. Rise to power, glory, and chains. They sang of me in the streets. They carved my name into their songs of war. The Philistines lifted me high upon their shoulders, not out of love, but out of pride in what I represented. I was their proof that Israel could be mocked, their reason to believe in their own supremacy. My presence alone was enough to silence an army, my shadow enough to break the courage of men. To the world, I was unstoppable. To myself, I was drowning. Every cheer that rang through the valley was another chain binding me tighter. Every victory became a prison, every triumph another bar in the cage. History remembers me as invincible, yet they forget the nights I could not sleep, staring into the darkness, haunted by the thought, what if I fall? What will remain of me when the crowd stops cheering? Even heroes outside the scriptures tell this same tale. Achilles, adored for his might, but undone by his pride. Samson, a Hebrew giant, blinded by his strength until it led him to ruin. The pedestal is always high, and the fall always fatal. And so it was with me. The lesson echoes across time. The higher the praise, the heavier the chains. When you are crowned a champion, you cease to belong to yourself. You belong to expectation, to legend, to fear. I walked not as a free man, but as a shadow of what others demanded I be, and perhaps you too have felt this weight, the expectation to be perfect, unbreakable, untouchable. But perfection is a prison, and chains of glory cut as deep as chains of iron. So as the songs grew louder, so did the silence within me. I became the warrior everyone feared, but I could not escape the truth that even giants bleed. This is the paradox of power. The more you are worshipped, the less you are truly seen. And this was the stage upon which my final battle would be set. The Valley of Elah, where strength would meet faith, and where my chains would finally shatter beneath the flight of a single stone. The hidden cracks, pride, fear, and silence. Every victory they placed upon my shoulders became another stone in a tower I could no longer climb down from. I stood tall, but inside I was shrinking. Pride was not my crown, it was my chain. They thought I roared because I was fearless, but truth whispered otherwise. I roared because silence terrified me. In the hush of night, when the battle cries faded and the songs of triumph grew dim, I was left with a single haunting thought. What if I fall? Imagine living in a world where one mistake erases your entire existence. That was my prison. My people saw me as invincible, a fortress of flesh and steel, but I carried secret cracks within my soul. I could not confess them, for the giant was not permitted weakness. The cheers demanded perfection, the songs demanded glory, and my own heart trembled at the thought that I was merely a man pretending to be a god. Look at our world now. Athletes collapsing under the pressure of endless winds, leaders pretending to be unbreakable while drowning in silence, families crushed under the weight of appearances. Pride deceives us all. It tells us that we are safe, so long as no one sees our weakness. But pride is a liar, and fear is its faithful servant. Every time I raised my sword in victory, I felt the cage close tighter. Every time the Philistines called me champion, I felt less like a man and more like an echo of their expectations. I laughed at my enemies not because they were small, but because laughter was my shield against terror. Pride demanded that I wear armor not only on my body, but also on my soul. And in that armor, no one could touch me, but neither could anyone reach me. The lesson is piercing. When strength becomes your only language, silence becomes your only companion. The hidden cracks are always there, small doubts, sleepless nights, the quiet longing to be seen beyond the mask. And it is these cracks, not the stones of your enemies, that will one day bring you down. The Valley of Elah, facing the unexpected. The sun burned above, merciless and heavy, as two armies faced each other across the valley. The Israelites shouted their prayers, the Philistines roared their defiance, and between them I stepped forward, towering, armored, glittering like bronze in the fire of noon. To them I was death incarnate. To me it was another day of chains. And then I saw him, a boy, no sword, no shield, no armor of bronze, just a sling in his hand and a fire in his eyes. I laughed, for what else could I do? How could a giant confess fear before a shepherd child? Yet inside me a storm raged, for I knew in that moment that this was no ordinary encounter. Strength I could predict, swords I could measure, spears I could block. But faith is invisible. Faith is unpredictable. Faith terrifies the giant more than the blade. He spoke not with trembling, but with certainty. His words cut deeper than any weapon, that his God would deliver me into his hands. It was not his sling I feared, but the conviction in his voice. For I carried pride. He carried purpose. I bore chains of glory. He bore the freedom of belief. Think of the times when the smallest voices defied the strongest empires. A single truth against an ocean of lies. A spark against endless night. That day, I was the ocean, and he was the spark. And the spark did not fear drowning. The valley held its breath as we faced each other. My armor gleamed, his sling turned silently in the air, and in that pause I understood something bitter. Giants do not fall because of stones. They fall because of what they never prepared for. I was ready for swords. I was ready for warriors. I was ready for battles of muscle and blood. But I was not ready for the storm inside a boy's heart. This is the lesson that crosses time and speaks to us now. The greatest threat is not always the strongest opponent, but the one who has nothing to lose and everything to prove. In that valley, power met faith, and faith does not measure height. So I stood, the giant of the Philistines, the embodiment of pride, facing a boy who carried only conviction. The world remembers what came next as a victory for Israel, a triumph for David. But within my chest, in that fleeting moment before the stone flew, I already knew. The battle was not mine. It never had been. My pride was already crumbling, my chains already breaking, and the valley itself was waiting for the sound of my fall. The stone. When pride meets destiny. The air grew still as the boy lifted his sling. Time seemed to tremble, as if heaven itself held its breath. My armor gleamed, my shield towered, my voice thundered across the valley. Yet inside me, silence screamed louder than any war cry. The stone whistled through the air, a sound sharper than steel, quicker than thought, lighter than everything I carried, and yet heavier than the weight of my pride. In that instant, I felt not just the impact on my brow, but the collapse of an empire built inside my chest. The stone struck not only my skull, but the fortress of arrogance I had lived within. It shattered the illusion that strength alone can save a man. As my knees buckled, as the sky spun above me, I saw my story unravel in fragments. The cheers of victories past, the faces of those who raised me as a weapon, the lonely boy I once was, all flashing like lightning before the storm of darkness closed in. I fell, not as an enemy slain, but as a man undone by his own chains. Do you understand? The stone was never just a weapon in David's sling. It was the truth hurled against the lie I had become. The truth that faith can be stronger than flesh, that conviction can be deadlier than the sword, that humility can fell even the tallest giant. This moment repeats itself across the ages. Pharaoh drowned in the sea of his own pride. Nebuchadnezzar crawled on the earth like a beast when his arrogance reached heaven. Kings and emperors crumble not because their armies are weak, but because their hearts are blind. The fall of Goliath is not a tale of brute force. It is the timeless reminder that downfall begins long before the blow is struck. It begins in the hidden cracks of pride, in the refusal to listen, in the silence that grows when we are too afraid to admit weakness. Perhaps you too have felt the stone, an unexpected blow, a failure that shattered your confidence, a truth that stripped away your illusions. It hurts, yes, it feels like death. But within that fall is a strange mercy. For when the fortress of pride collapses, the soul can finally breathe again. My body struck the dust, but my spirit was freed from chains it had carried too long. That is the paradox. The stone that killed me also unbound me. The aftermath. What my fall meant. The valley roared with victory songs as Israel lifted their shepherd boy high, while my people sank into silence, their faith crushed beneath my broken body. The tales spread like fire, the great Philistine giant destroyed by a boy's sling. From that day forward, I was remembered not as a man, not as a son, not as a brother, but as a warning. Goliath became a name of scorn, a symbol of arrogance, a shadow cast to glorify another's light. History did not ask who I was. It only needed me as the villain to magnify the hero. This is the cruel economy of memory. The victor writes the song, and the fallen are reduced to echoes. Israel remembered David as chosen, while Philistine children were taught to hide their shame. Yet no one spoke of the boy who once longed for love, the warrior who fought because he had no choice, the man whose chains were forged by the hands of his own people. I became a story stripped of humanity. And still my voice calls out through the ages. Am I only a monster? Or am I a mirror of every soul who trusted too much in their own strength, every heart that mistook applause for love, every life turned into a symbol at the cost of its humanity? Perhaps I am not alone. Perhaps you too have worn chains of expectation, lived beneath the weight of pride, or carried scars no one cared to see. History simplifies. It paints heroes in gold and villains in ash. But life is not so simple. Every giant was once a child. Every enemy has a story. Every fall hides a lesson. And mine is this: beware of stories told by only one side, for they turn men into monsters and forget the tears beneath their armor. The legacy of my death is not only that David rose, it is that you might learn. Learn that pride imprisons more cruelly than chains. Learn that faith can topple walls higher than any fortress. Learn that those you call villains may be carrying burdens you never imagined. If my voice reaches you now, let it remind you that even in defeat, even in disgrace, even in the dust, a man's story can still carry light. So I ask you, not as a giant, but as one who once longed to be seen, what chains are you carrying? What stones are you ignoring that might one day strike? Share your voice, let it be heard, for silence is the heaviest burden of all. And if this story awakens something within you, let your heart speak in the comments below. For every reflection matters, every perspective holds truth, and even the forgotten deserve to be remembered. The dust of the valley has long settled, yet my voice still lingers. I was called the giant, the enemy of Israel, the symbol of arrogance struck down by a single stone. That is the tale sung in songs, carved into sermons, whispered in the halls of faith. But behind the armor, behind the roar, behind the fall, I was flesh and blood. I was Goliath. And in my story there is a lesson that belongs not only to the past, but to every heart listening now. They told the world I was defeated by strength too small to measure, but the truth is deeper. I was undone not by a sling, but by pride. My chains were forged in silence. My downfall began in the hidden cracks of fear. My death was written long before the stone flew. And maybe, just maybe, you know this same prison. Maybe you have carried the crushing weight of expectation, the endless demand to be perfect, to stand tall, to never bend. Maybe you have built your walls so high that no one can see the trembling soul inside. Giants do not only walk in battlefields. Giants live in our own hearts. Fear, shame, arrogance, regret. And like me, many fall not because they are weak, but because they never dared to face the stone within. But listen closely. Even in my fall there is healing. Even in my defeat there is light. The story of David and Goliath is not merely about the triumph of small over great. It is about the freedom that comes when illusion shatters. I became the warning etched in history, that the tallest warrior can crumble, that the loudest voice can break, that the strongest flesh can fail. Yet within that ruin is hope. For when the chains of pride snap, when the fortress of arrogance collapses, the soul finally breathes again. My story is not one of despair, but of remembrance. Do not forget the boy who stood with faith, but do not forget the man who carried too much. Do not forget me. When you walk into your own valleys, when you face battles that tower above you, remember that the stone is not always outside. It may already be inside, waiting to awaken you, waiting to free you. And when the weight feels unbearable, when the world crowns you with expectations you cannot carry, pause. Lay it down. Let yourself be seen, not as a symbol, not as a weapon, but as a soul. That is the healing my story offers. That is the gift hidden beneath the dust of Elah. So I turn now to you. What giants are you facing? What stones have struck your heart? Share your voice. Let your story be known in the comments, for even in your brokenness there is a message the world needs. If this journey has stirred something inside you, if the voice of Goliath helped you find light in the shadows, I invite you to give back a little of that light. A like, a share, a subscription, small gestures that carry immense power, helping this voice reach further, helping more hearts remember the truths buried in forgotten stories. And if you feel moved, if this tale has brought value to your spirit or comfort in your struggle, I welcome your support in any form of encouragement, for even the smallest act is a treasure to me, a spark that allows me to continue weaving these words of scripture and life into new stories. Remember this above all: heroes and villains are not as simple as history paints them. I was called a monster, but I was a man. And if you carry anything from my confession, let it be this truth. Do not measure yourself by victories. Do not chain yourself to pride. Do not forget the child within you longing to be seen. My fall became David's triumph, but my voice remains as a mirror for you. Look into it. Ask yourself, who are the giants you need to face, and what stones will finally set you free? Thank you for walking this valley with me, for letting my voice touch your spirit. If these words have lit even a small fire in your soul, let it shine. Share your thoughts below. Let your questions rise, even if they stir debate. For truth is sharpened by honest voices. And if you choose to stand with me to support this work, know that you are not only helping me, you are helping every forgotten voice find life again. From the depths of my heart, I thank you. For though I once fell in silence, today, through you, my story lives.